let me ask about your views on AI and LLMs. They're getting better and better mathematics, and we've spoken about collaborators, and you have so many collaborators. Do you see AI as a potential great collaborator to you as a mathematician? And what do you think the future role of those
Right.
kinds of AI systems is?
I guess I would draw a distinction between, what we have currently and what might come in future years. I've played around with it and I've tried um, experimenting, but I haven't found it helpful at all. Basically zero. It's not helpful to me. And, I've used various systems and so on, the paid models and so on. And um, my typical experience is interacting with AI on a mathematical question is that it gives me garbage answers that are not mathematically correct.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I find that not helpful and also frustrating. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I was interacting with a person, the frustrating thing is when you have to argue about whether or not, the argument that they gave you is right and you point out exactly the error
Mm-hmm.
and the AI saying, "Oh, it's totally fine." And
Mm-hmm.
and if I were having such an experience with a person, I would simply refuse to talk to that person
Mm-hmm.
again. But okay, one has to overlook these kind of
Mm-hmm.
flaws. And so I tend to be a kind of skeptic about the value, the current value of the current AI systems as far as mathematical reasoning is concerned. It seems not reliable. Um, okay, but I know for a fact that there are several prominent mathematicians who I have enormous respect for, who are saying that they are using it in a way
Mm-hmm.
that's helpful, and I'm often very surprised to hear that based on my own experience, which is quite the opposite. Uh, and so maybe my process isn't any good, although, I use it for other things like, for programming things or for image generation and so on. It's amazingly powerful and helpful. But for mathematical arguments, I haven't found it helpful. And maybe I'm not interacting with it in the right way
Yeah.
yet, or it could be. And so maybe I just need to improve my skill. But also maybe I wonder, like, these examples that are provided by other people maybe involved quite a huge amount of interaction. And so I wonder if maybe the mathematical ideas are really coming from the person, these great
Mm-hmm.
mathematicians who are doing it rather than the AI. And so, so I tend to be kind of skeptical, but also I'm skeptical for another reason. And that is because of the nature of the large language model approach to AI doing mathematics. Um, I recognize that the AI is trying to give me an argument that sounds like a proof rather than an argument that is a proof. The motivation is misplaced. And and so I worry that this is a very dangerous source of error because it often happens in mathematics that I mean, if I think back to when I was an undergrad, here at Caltech, and I was a math major eventually, and at that time, LaTeX was a pretty new thing, and I was learning LaTeX, and so I was typing up my homeworks in LaTeX, and they looked beautiful.
Yeah.
Actually, they looked like garbage. From my current standards, I'm
Yeah.
sure it was
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
Except at the time, I didn't know anything. I was an undergrad, and LaTeX was sort of unheard of, and so I was producing these beautifully typeset,
Mm-hmm.
problem set solutions and so on. And I would print it up and submit it and so on, and the grades would come back terrible grades. And I realized what was happening is
Mm-hmm.
that the the copy was so beautiful, mathematically typeset in this way. It looked like the kind of mathematics you find in a book,
Mm-hmm.
because basically that's the only time you saw that kind of mathematical typesetting was in a professional, published book.
Mm-hmm.
And that mathematics was almost always correct in a
Mm-hmm.
book, right? And so I had somehow, you know, lost my
Mm.
critical because it was so beautiful, and I was used to only seeing that kind of typesetting when an argument was, totally right. I
Yeah.
wasn't critical enough and making these sort of bonehead mistakes in the proofs. And so, okay, so I corrected this, of course.
But this kind of effect is very much real with the modern LLM systems.
Yes.
That's
And
right.
so I think that the chat programs and so on are producing these arguments that look really
Mhm.
they look like that's what they're striving to do. That it's what they're designed to do. They're not designed to make a logically correct argument. They're designed to make something that looks like a logically correct argument. And it's easy to get fooled if you're not skeptical. And so that's why I worry a bit when people rely on AI for mathematical arguments. I mean, tying them to lean and the formal proof verification systems and so on, this is a totally different
Mhm.
way of operating. But for the sort of ordinary person sitting down and using chat to come up with a mathematical argument, I think it's a dangerous source of error if you're not especially attuned to this very issue that the AI is going to produce something that's not grounded in mathematical understanding, but rather something that is trying to look like something that is grounded in
Mhm.
mathematical understanding. And those are not the same thing at all. And furthermore, I really wonder if one can make a kind of system for producing genuine mathematical insight that isn't based in what I would view as mathematical understanding, as opposed to the text generation systems. The methods that are used, yeah, they don't seem close enough grounded in understanding of the underlying mathematical concepts, but rather grounded in the way words appear on a page in arguments about those concepts, which are not the same.
So there's a couple of things to say there. So one, I think there is a real skill in providing the LLM system with enough information to be a good collaborator.
Yeah,
Because you really are dealing with it's not a human being. You really have to load in everything you possibly can from your body of work, from the way you're thinking, and that's a real skill. And then the other thing is, for me, if it's at all anything like programming, because I have a lot of colleagues and friends who are programmers who kind of feel similarly to you. And for me, I've gotten better and better and better at giving as much information as possible to the systems in a really structured way. Maybe because I just like natural language as a way to express my thinking. And then the benefit comes from the inspiration that the system can provide by its ability to know a lot of things and make connections between disparate fields and between disparate concepts. And in that way, it provides not the answer, but the inspiration, the hand holding, the camaraderie that helps me get to the answer because it does know a lot more than me. Like knowledge. And if you give it a lot of information and ask the broader questions, it can make some really beautiful connections. But I do find that I have to be extremely patient. Like you said, the amount of times I'll do something dumb where I feel like, "Oh, you don't get this at all, do you?" That's a source of a lot of frustration for us humans. Like this thing doesn't understand at all. If you can have the patience to look past that, there might be some brilliant little um, insights that it can provide.
right.
At least for me in the realm of programming, I should say programming. There's just so much training data. There's so much there, and at least I see the light at the end of the tunnel of promising possibilities of it being a good collaborator versus like something that it gives you really true genius level insights.
Right. It's probably true. Uh, I also find it likely that a lot of as far as mathematical training data is concerned, I just have to assume that MathOverflow answers are part of the training
Yes,
data.
of course.
It's so,
And you're, I
so,
mean, you're talking to yourself
right.
essentially.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.